Most people never notice it until it's too late. The world doesn't destroy them, comfort does. Every distraction, every pointless talk, every hit of validation dulls the blade. You lose your edge not because someone takes it, but because you stop guarding it. That's where Machiavelli comes in. Exiled, stripped of power, forgotten, yet he didn't collapse. He observed. He wrote The Prince, a manual for control born from isolation, not privilege. This video reveals why solitude isn't weakness, it's strategy. You'll learn how silence turns into strength, how distance breeds control, and how to use being alone to forge a mind sharper than fear. Stay till the end, because once you grasp this, solitude will stop feeling empty and start feeling like power. Most people move through life blind, not from ignorance, but from noise. Their minds are never still enough to see reality as it is. Every moment, they're flooded with words, reactions, and opinions that bury their own perception. Their days are consumed by conversations that mean nothing and emotions that aren't even theirs. They become mirrors reflecting everyone else's chaos, and mistake that reflection for identity. They confuse movement for progress, approval for connection, and distraction for meaning. Surrounded by people, they absorb second-hand beliefs like oxygen, never realizing they've stopped breathing on their own. They react before they think. They imitate before they understand. And worst of all, they lie to themselves, because the crowd rewards the lie. The illusion of belonging feels safer than the risk of clarity. But when a man isolates himself, the fog begins to lift. The noise fades. The masks he wore to be accepted start to feel heavy and unnecessary. The illusions that once comforted him begin to suffocate him. And for the first time, he sees the world without filters, brutal, unpolished, undeniable. He sees himself stripped of excuses and distractions. And in that terrifying stillness, clarity is born, and clarity is power. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. When he was exiled, disgraced, and forgotten, he didn't waste his exile trying to reclaim approval. He watched. He listened to silence until it started speaking back. In that solitude, he saw the patterns hidden beneath human behavior, the machinery that polite society pretends doesn't exist. He discovered that most men are cowards disguised as moralists, that loyalty ends where benefit does, that fear outlasts love, that people crave control, they simply want to be deceived gently. These are truths that comfort cannot reveal, only distance can. And that's why Machiavelli could predict men's behavior like a chess master reading the next 10 moves. His isolation didn't weaken him, it refined his perception. He became dangerous not by gaining power, but by losing illusion. Now ask yourself, how sharp would your own vision be if you cut through the noise? No praise softening your flaws. No digital applause feeding your ego. No shallow conversations numbing your instincts. Just you, face to face with the truth. It's uncomfortable. It's merciless. But it's real. And once you confront reality without filters, you gain something others can't even recognize: leverage. While the world reacts, you calculate. While others chase validation, you position yourself. While they play the roles they've been assigned, you start rewriting the script. That's what solitude gives you, not isolation, but advantage. When you step back, patterns appear. You start to see who genuinely respects you, who fears losing you, and who only pretends to care. You begin to hear the quiet deceit in people's words, and, more importantly, in your own. That's when your power becomes real, because it's built not on fantasy, but on observation. Solitude is not escape, it's exposure. It strips you of noise and forces you to confront what remains: your laziness, your vanity, your false ambitions, your dependency on others for meaning. Most people run from this confrontation their entire lives. But if you endure it, if you resist the urge to escape back into comfort, something rare happens. You evolve. You stop needing to be right, you start needing to see clearly. You no longer chase outcomes, you study them. You stop playing emotional games, you start reading them. Clarity becomes your compass. Precision becomes your language. While others drown in drama, you watch from above, calm and calculating. That's why the most powerful men in history walked alone. Not because they hated others, but because they outgrew illusion. They chose truth over company. And truth, unfiltered, cruel, liberating truth, is only found in silence. You can't reach it when you're trying to be liked. You can't reach it when you're afraid to offend. You can't reach it when you're surrounded by people who need you to stay small. If you want real vision, not motivation, but mastery, you must step away long enough for every illusion to die. And when it does, you return changed. You stop acting different, you start seeing different. You stop reacting to life, you begin designing it. That's the origin of true power. It doesn't start with control over others. It starts with control over perception. And the man who conquers illusion doesn't just survive the world, he shapes it. Most people aren't slaves to systems, they're slaves to attention. They mistake connection for strength, and approval for identity. They check their reflection not in the mirror, but in other people's reactions. Every compliment becomes oxygen, every silence feels like suffocation. They crave acknowledgement so deeply that they'll trade freedom for it without even noticing. They need to be seen, liked, noticed, reassured. It's a hunger that governs modern life, scrolling for validation, posting for relevance, performing for strangers. Their worth exists only in the eyes of others, and when those eyes turn away, they collapse. That's not living. That's dependency disguised as belonging. Machiavelli warned centuries ago, "The one who depends on others to stand will fall when they walk away." Look around, that warning describes almost everyone. People who can't think without feedback, can't rest without attention, can't act unless someone approves. They live as reflections, not as forces. The world doesn't have to chain them, it only needs to distract them. But the man who breaks that pattern, who chooses solitude over applause, becomes untouchable. He no longer chases affection, popularity, or permission. He stops seeking to be chosen and chooses himself instead. He learns to operate without validation, to build without witnesses, to move without noise. That's what solitude does, it detoxes you from dependency. It cuts the invisible strings that pull your emotions and dictates your pace. It forces you to rely on your own thoughts, to trust your instincts, to find stability not in attention but in discipline. This is the essence of real power, the ability to move without asking, to act without flinching, to create without applause. When you depend on others emotionally, you become predictable, a machine waiting for input. Say the right words and you're elevated, withhold approval and you crumble. That's not power, that's servitude. But when you embrace solitude, you reclaim the controls. You remove every hand that could ever pull your strings. You stop being programmable. You stop being reactive. You stop being owned. That's why society teaches you to fear being alone, because a man who's comfortable in solitude can't be manipulated. He can't be hurted by fear of rejection or starved by lack of attention. He becomes immune to the mechanisms that rule everyone else. Machiavelli never romanticized human nature, he dissected it. He saw that most people's so-called morality is just fear wearing a mask, that their need for approval makes them easy to command. Power, he realized, belongs not to those who are followed, but to those who can stand apart. Cut off the need to be seen, and you stop being ruled. That's why kings, generals, and rulers often choose isolation. not out of contempt for people, but out of necessity. They know proximity weakens authority. Familiarity erodes fear. And when fear fades, respect follows. To maintain control, they create distance, physical, emotional, psychological. If you want respect, create space. If you want power, learn to walk alone. Because the man who walks alone moves faster, sees clearer, and acts without compromise. He doesn't need consensus to proceed or applause to believe in his vision. He's not distracted by noise, nor slowed by emotion. While others negotiate approval, he executes. So what does solitude look like in the real world? It's saying no, not to people, but to delusion. It's stepping back from those who offer comfort but no evolution. It's being willing to be misunderstood, even resented, because your focus is not validation, it's ascension. It's long nights of thinking, building, planning, while others chase distraction, gossip, and dopamine. It's the quiet grind that no one claps for, the discipline that no one sees. It's not easy. It's not glamorous. It's not popular. But it's how every empire begins, not with noise, but with distance. Machiavelli didn't learn power in palaces or through charm, he learned it in exile, when everything that made him important was taken away. When titles, allies, and influence vanished, what remained was silence, and that silence became his teacher. Stripped of approval, stripped of noise, he faced the one thing most men fear most, himself. But instead of collapsing, he watched. He studied. He listened to the patterns of human nature without distraction, until truth replaced illusion. From that isolation came The Prince, not a book of ideals, but a field manual for manipulation, control, and dominance. Every line of it was carved from stillness, every principle tested in the solitude of disgrace. Machiavelli didn't need a throne to understand rulers. He didn't need friends to grasp loyalty. He didn't need applause to see how fear governs men. All he needed was distance, distance from the noise that blinds the weak. Because the crowd doesn't just surround you, it infects you. Stay among them long enough, and their thoughts become your own. Their anxieties seep into your bloodstream. Their limitations become the borders of your potential. They trade truth for belonging, and you join the trade without realizing it. But solitude breaks that trance. It lifts you out of the current and lets you see from above, where patterns replace chaos, and power stops being emotional and starts being mathematical. When you're alone, your perception shifts. You begin to see the motives behind people's actions, the cracks in their confidence, the machinery beneath their masks. Your mind stops chasing reactions and starts building strategy. You become harder to manipulate, harder to read, harder to reach. That's why powerful men retreat before they rise. It's not retreat, it's refinement. You can't build a fortress while standing in the crowd's applause. You can't shape precision in an environment built for distraction. You can't become a ruler while emotionally entangled with those you're meant to rise above. Solitude isn't loneliness. It's strategic detachment, a deliberate withdrawal from the noise that weakens men. Most fill their silence with people, because facing their own thoughts feels unbearable. They need constant distraction to avoid confronting who they are without an audience. But here's the uncomfortable truth: if you can't sit alone with your own mind, you don't own it. Power begins where dependency ends. And that sovereignty, the ability to govern yourself, only exists when no one's watching, no one's praising, and no one's saving you. In solitude, there's no external compass to guide you. You either create order within, or you fall apart. That's why most never reach mastery. They fear the silence that exposes their untrained mind. Your brain adapts to what it's surrounded by. Immerse it in noise, and it becomes anxious, reactive, overstimulated. Immerse it in silence, and it becomes sharp, composed, decisive. That's why isolation is terrifying. It strips away every excuse. You can no longer hide your weakness behind busyness, your fear behind talk, your confusion behind the opinions of others. In solitude, there's only the truth, and the truth is merciless. It will show you how much time you've wasted on people who never mattered. How much potential you've traded for approval. How much of your life was built around avoidance, not purpose. It will burn through the layers of laziness and self-deception until there's nothing left but what's real and what's capable. But if you endure that fire, what emerges is clarity. A mind that no longer needs noise to think. A heart that no longer needs validation to move. You gain emotional independence, composure, control, the foundations of real dominance. You stop seeking permission to act. You stop explaining yourself. You stop needing to be understood. You simply move, quietly, deliberately, effectively. Machiavelli once wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved." He wasn't celebrating cruelty, he was teaching control. Love depends on closeness, attention, and constant reassurance. Fear survives in distance, and distance requires discipline. Solitude trains that discipline. It teaches you to stabilize your emotions without support, to work without reward, to focus without noise. It builds resilience because no one is clapping. It builds precision because no one is watching. It builds confidence because there's no one left to impress. And when you return from that silence, you're not the same. You're colder, because emotion no longer governs you. Sharper, because distraction no longer divides you. Focused, because you no longer chase what's meaningless. People will say, "You've changed. You're distant. You're hard to reach." Good. Let them talk. They've confused accessibility with relevance. You're not here to be liked, you're here to be remembered. So disappear for a while. Go silent. Build in the dark. Cut the noise until your thoughts turn to steel. Because the man who masters solitude masters everything: power, perception, and himself. You can't sharpen a blade in chaos. And you can't sharpen a mind in noise. Today's world is addicted to chatter. Everyone's talking, no one's thinking. Most men are drowning in input. The few who can sit in silence, they rule the rest. They consume endlessly: news, opinions, entertainment, mistaking repetition for intelligence. But here's the truth: if you don't create space for silence, your mind will never sharpen into a weapon. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He didn't write from luxury, he wrote from exile. Rejected, stripped of power, humiliated. But instead of collapsing, he turned silence into strength. He used isolation not to complain, but to observe, to dissect human nature with surgical precision. And from that stillness came The Prince, a book that has haunted rulers for over 500 years. Why? Because it was written not with emotion, but with clarity cold enough to cut through illusion. Noise makes your mind reactive. Silence makes it strategic. When you're constantly surrounded by people, you start thinking like them, inheriting their fears, their limits, their mediocrity. You blend into the herd. But when you remove distractions, detach from constant input, and sit in real quiet, something shifts. You begin to hear your own mind clearly for the first time. And what you hear might unsettle you. You'll realize how little of your thinking was ever your own. How much of your identity came from others. You'll feel the discomfort of seeing how mentally soft you've become. But that discomfort, that moment of confrontation, is where real power begins. Because in silence, you rebuild. You stop reacting and start calculating. You think in terms of consequences, not emotions, in terms of angles, not approval. You start to move like a strategist, not a participant. That's how rulers think. That's how Machiavelli trained his mind, isolated, dismissed, forgotten by the world, yet mentally 5 steps ahead of kings. Because the quietest room produces the sharpest mind. Look around you. People talk endlessly because they think too little. They fear silence because silence reveals truth, and most don't want truth, they want comfort. But power doesn't live in comfort. It lives in clarity. And clarity only comes from solitude. Silence gives you what the noisy world never will. Focus, your energy stops scattering. Discipline, you command your impulses instead of serving them. Pattern recognition, you begin to see how people think, move, and fail. Self-control, you become unreadable, unprovocable, unbreakable. That's when people begin to fear you, not because you threaten them, but because they can't decode you. You're not emotional. You're not predictable. You've gone silent and dangerous. Your words hit harder because they're not born from noise but forged in stillness. That's why Machiavellian thinking is feared. It's not loud or impulsive, it's deliberate, designed. The average mind, suffocating in distraction, simply can't compete. If you want your mind to become lethal, protect your silence. Guard your time. Starve your distractions. Train your brain to sit in stillness until it stops craving chaos and starts producing strategy. Silence isn't emptiness, it's concentration. And the man who can sit still, think deeply, and act precisely becomes something rare, a thinker among talkers, a ruler among followers, a weapon in a world of noise. There's a hidden currency more powerful than wealth, rarer than loyalty, and more dangerous when wasted, time. And most men bleed it dry. They wake up reactive, chase validation, drown in conversations that lead nowhere. They are slaves to distraction, servants to others' agendas. But the man who walks alone doesn't just manage his time, he owns it. And time, when weaponized, becomes the ultimate advantage in war, business, and life. Machiavelli knew this. He had no army, no fortune, no throne, but he had autonomy. While others schemed, he studied. While they argued, he calculated. While they begged for attention, he built clarity. Because the truth is simple, you cannot lead anything until you command your time. And you cannot command your time if you live surrounded by noise. Constant exposure to people makes you reactive, their moods dictate yours, their urgency replaces your rhythm, their noise drowns your focus. That's why solitude isn't peace, it's tactical advantage. It shields you from emotional contagion and lets you operate on your own frequency. When you control your rhythm, you control the battlefield. The men who rise above the crowd don't move faster, they move smarter. They stop chasing time and start bending it. While others exhaust themselves reacting to the world, they create distance, and that distance becomes control. Because the man who learns to operate in silence isn't running from life, he's redesigning it. His mornings are borders. His thoughts are weapons. His focus is armor. He stops trying to be everywhere and instead becomes unreachable. And that's when everything starts moving toward him. The truth is, most people never experience their full potential because they never isolate long enough to meet it. But if you can endure that stillness, you'll discover a version of yourself that doesn't chase, he attracts, commands, and executes. Power isn't found in movement. It's found in mastery of stillness. And when you learn to move from silence, every decision becomes deliberate, every action strategic, every step inevitable. If this spoke to you, don't stop here. Continue your ascent through the playlist Machiavellian Power as Design, where strategy becomes identity, and silence becomes dominance.